Another thing that's not funny is our ecumenical update. The Southern Baptist made some decisions, and the Vatican released a new document. We always shudder when we hear that's happening for the past decade.
Yes. So we'll get to the Vatican document, which is very complicated in and of itself. But I wanted to begin by talking about this meeting that the Baptists had, where they sort of try to talk about how they're going to organize the Southern Baptist Convention, which is one of the, if not the largest Protestant group in the United States. So this is a big deal. Whatever the Southern Baptists say, this is a big deal for the Protestant world. Now, one of the things that somebody proposed was, well, maybe, just maybe, we should accept the Nicene Creed.
Mr. President, my name is Andy Brown, and I'm a messenger of First Baptist Church of Starkville, Mississippi. I move that the messengers of this annual meeting of the Southern Baptist Convention affirm the Nicene Creed,
which the rest of Christendom had been doing for almost 1500 over 1500 years, but just maybe. Now, I'm really not surprised it was rejected, and one of the reasons for that, for example, David Allen, who was in the running for president of the Southern Baptist Convention, he said he has reservations about all the wording. He said, I don't know about all the wording in there. One of the most shocking things, and we can really tell how full of it's become a breeding ground for heresies, because it's simply unchained. It sort of can let us know how good we have it to have a magisterium, to be bound by certain propositions that the magisterium gives us that we have to accept. Here's what one of the smartest Protestants that there is, William Lane Craig, said with his reasonable faith. He says, as a Protestant who believes that the scripture alone is our ultimate and final authority, I think even the statements of ecumenical councils must be brought before scripture, and I see nothing in scripture that warrants saying that Christ has two wills. And this is being used as an excuse to reject Nicaea. And so that's been a big controversy recently. Now, something that we should understand is what William Lane Craig just stated there. It's heresy. The Council of Constantinople III has condemned that. Orthodox doctrine is, of course, that the Holy Trinity has one essence in three divine persons, and these persons are distinct based on their relations to each other, and that the second person, Jesus Christ, assumed a human nature, and along with a human nature comes a human will, of course, because he has a human soul, and that through the hypostatic union, through the incarnation, that's united to the divine nature, which makes him fully God and fully man. And here we have something that's just completely against that. Now, in the midst of this craziness coming from these Protestant groups, where they're not even willing to accept the Nicene Creed, the binding force of Christendom for many centuries, what do we see the Vatican doing? Well, we see the Vatican coming out with a new doctrine. Excuse me, not a new doctrine. Thank goodness it's not a new doctrine. A new document from not the Vatican itself, from Pope Francis and the ordinary magisterium. It wouldn't seem the magisterium is being used here, but simply a dicastery for religious unity, religious dialogue. And they've come out with a sort of study document that wants to to understand the different ecumenical dialogue that's been going on with these other Christian groups since Ut Unum Sint, which is the big ecumenical dialogue document that Pope John Paul II put out. That's too much to talk about here, but that document has major problems when you compare it to traditional Catholic teaching. Now, this
If I might
document,
just intervene there, if you're interested in that, we have an article in a prior edition of the paper. I forget which month, a month or two ago, about that document with some further explanation. And if you subscribe to the paper, you would have access to those back issues and could look into that.
Yeah, and it really is a huge issue, and every traditional Catholic really needs to understand that, because that's been the impetus behind this new ecumenical dialogue. So much of the document, which I slogged through this morning, it's 150 pages, takes about 3 hours to read. It's most of it is just simply comparing the different ecumenical dialogue that has been going on, and and really the conclusion that they come to is that Vatican I needs to be understood in its historical context. It needs to be understood that they were using words that made sense at the time because of the historical nature of it. But nowadays, we need to, and they say this directly, we need to interpret it through the lens of Vatican II. I'll quote it directly. They say Vatican I can only be correctly received in light of the teaching of the Second Vatican Council. Usually you hear it the other way around. The Second Vatican Council needs to be viewed in light of tradition. But of course, traditional Catholics know the game that's being played. What they really want to do is say the Second Vatican Council, that's the true dogma. We're going to interpret tradition in light of those new innovations that have been made that weren't even taught at an extraordinary magisterial level. Now, there's other issues as well when it comes to viewing the Roman primacy that I think really does compromise, could lend itself to compromising our position with something like the Eastern Orthodox, or really just conceding it entirely. One example of this is they say, since the Middle Ages, Catholic theologians claim that the ministry of the Pope is a ministry de jure divino, so of divine institute from the law of God, for divine law origin. And really already we're seeing a problem there, because it's saying since the Middle Ages. We have to say, a good interview to watch is the one with Eric Ybarra on this. This is a fundamental part of the constitution of the church, that the papacy is part of that DNA that makes the Catholic Church. And they go on and they say, in Pastor Aeternus, the First Vatican Council created a new situation, proclaiming these doctrines, the doctrines of papal primacy, as dogmas, they say. As you see, that's really, to wrap things up on this. We see just madness in regards to this. They're saying that we're trying to interpret tradition in light of all of these innovations that are coming out today. One last thing that I'll have our audience be aware of is these innovations really can creep in even into the traditional movement. I'll direct everybody to CatholicFamilyNews.com, a response article that I made to something written in Crisis Magazine that suggested that we need a new ecumenism, that we need to introduce new low church Protestant liturgies with Eucharistic prayers in order to get these Protestants on board. In light of one of the most intelligent Protestant men, William Lane Craig, coming out even denying the Nicene Creed, I highly question whether or not that's what the church needs right now in this crisis, whether or not the church really needs new Protestant liturgies, new Protestant pastors to run the Catholic Church. I think not. I think this document leads us nowhere. I think this document only leads to additional confusion. We need to get back to the old doctrines of the Catholic Church that say the Catholic Church is the Catholic Papal Society, doesn't subsist in it. It is the Catholic Church, and we need to get back to that if we're going to really want to see progress towards these people noticing that they need to convert to the Catholic Church. That is, if we want to use the term, that's the only real ecumenism we need, bringing these people inside the Catholic Church.
Well, I think one of our live viewers, Paisley, actually couldn't have summed that up better. Dialogue, blah, blah, blah. Absolutely right. And that is the point. This ecumenical dialogue has been going on for decades now, since really even during the council and just before they established these ecumenical offices and positions, accelerated under John Paul II. And look, at this is where we are. Right, the Southern Baptist Convention they haven't come closer to the Catholic faith. They don't even accept Nicaea now. I mean, what's going to be next? Let's have a vote. Do we actually believe that Jesus Christ is God, right, or is part of our religion? I mean, that's like, about, once you get rid of the Nicene Creed, there's not much left.
Mhm.
But you would think after all these decades of dialogue, you'd have something to show for it more than a further apostatizing, falling away. But on the Vatican I point, I find it really interesting because the kind of Pope splainers, the establishment who want to, uh, force everyone to quote accept Vatican II, the one other council they would hold on to was Vatican I in a distorted interpretation, because they wanted to use Vatican I to hit traditionalists over the head, to say you have to do whatever the Pope says, whatever the Pope says you have to do, no matter what, without any of the qualifications or understanding of Vatican I. So they wanted to distort it to create this sort of super hyper papolatry to cram Vatican II down. But now they're sort of backtracking on that, and sort of want to get rid of that, right? And even want to get rid of that for these ecumenical purposes. So I find that kind of an interesting development, that they are kind of turning on that instrument that they wanted, because it was always contradictory, right? They want to be ecumenical with all these other groups that don't want to have any authority or hierarchy, but when it comes to traditional Catholics, yeah, you're dumping faithful to Vatican I's definition of the papacy, and they can maybe at least are realizing those two positions are a bit controversial. If you can be okay and be in your ecumenical dialogue as Southern Baptists who reject Nicaea, but you follow the Council of Trent, you're out. Is a bit confusing.
Yeah, I do think this lends itself to just continual contradictions over and over again. And that's really the nature of this that we're dealing with. And just maybe that's to some of our audience who might be confused at this. Look, dialogue isn't the same as like just talking to a
Right.
Protestant. I think there's fruit to be had in talking with Protestants, trying to figure out where you disagree, and then saying, here's why we're right. Here's why what we're saying has basis in the church fathers, has basis in scripture. Here's why you need it in order to receive the forgiveness that Christ offers. There's a difference between that and this 150-page long list of dialogues that people are saying, well, there's confusion from the Episcopal Church that ordains women about this. They have problems with this. They have problems with this, where it's endless. There is no resolution. And those that do want to find resolution end up with monstrosities like creating new Protestant liturgies with Eucharistic prayers, or letting Protestant pastors in. That's not a solution. So this is ultimately it's a sterile project that they're working on. There is no fruit that will be produced. So it has to get back to, yes, we're going to talk with Protestants, get rid of any misunderstandings that we have with Protestants. But at the end of the day, we have to proclaim the Catholic faith. We don't want to water down the Catholic faith, water down, misinterpret, re-receive Vatican I just so other groups can accept it. Then you have a baseless faith. A faith that's not based in anything except for confused, watered down statements, and then you have no faith at all.
No, you just have a situation.
A situation, right?
Created a situation.